be neighborly. Let's avail ourselves. Right now, they're not doing anything, but they have seen the social media that you are referring to. People need to step up and not wait for somebody to say, so let's be neighborly, more the community in Zarona.
All right. Now, many people fear the recurrence of natural disasters, as we're also expecting. How can we address these fears and help people manage anxiety in a possible way? Because at the end of the day, we are still experiencing this, and you are saying as communities and make sure that we show up and ask, how can we help?
Yeah. The biggest thing right now is lack of information, not knowing where to go, right? And maybe rather than asking people to come to help, we should be going to them with help. So I'm not part of the coordination, but I imagine the council people already know where the locations of the most affected families. And then we actually mobilize the right resources to people. The biggest thing right now is the lack of information. How have people been affected? But right? But the thing that I'm most concerned about is the people who seemingly haven't been affected. Social media. We underestimate how the psychological impact the disaster. The so-called affected psychologically, because how right? That is actually the part that is really hard to reckon with, because you feel separate from others, but yet you are connected. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does.
So for those people, are consuming the images from their social media. Kids start feeling fearful of what is going on. How did we put our aidit or aidit is going to be the man on top of the car. The kids can't separate Didi from that other Didi that was on the car. So it's very important the banabarona. Check in with them. How are you feeling? And don't you shouldn't be fearful, Papa. We are fine here. Water is not coming to us. No, that is how they feel. Acknowledge that and avail yourself as a support. You know, the kid is just needing reassurance from you. The other thing that we should be thinking about, they start being clingy, right? So kids are also feeling vulnerable right now. And kids are watching you, how you react to the disaster.
But what are the immediate psychological responses people often have when faced with the disaster? You're saying as a parent, be there as this structure that gives hope to these ones that are so fearful. And how can they cope in the first critical hours?
The first critical hours. We're past the critical hours, right? I get it. We are at week 1 and 1 day.
Yeah.
Of the thing. So I want us go to what I need you to be thinking about is very good. You went through the disaster yourself. This is the one disaster that we've all went in. The thing is, right? How you're currently feeling is exactly how you're supposed to be feeling. In disaster psychology, we say these are normal reactions to abnormal situations. Some people are going to be very forgetful, again, depending on where the disaster finds them. Some people are busybodies. They need to be just moving, right? Hypervigilant, hypovigilant. Or disengage. Have you ever been with somebody who's there but they're not there, right? They're somewhere else. They're not where their feet are. And then you've got oilungore has to be holding on to everything. It's just a coping mechanism, right? Coping healthy. Some people are drinking more, some people are smoking more, and the violence will be more. Ke gore hela, that's a human, it's the fight and flight nervous system. E kikang ene. Right? I get on a go nna le letswalo. Right? So ba ileng gore ba na le ntho, letswalo la bone le a go godimo. You get it?
But how do we get to a point whereby we acknowledge that we react differently because of the situation in front of us? How do we get to a point whereby we do not panic because we've seen other people, also shopong and what has coming, they've been, hurt. How do we get to relate with that?
I don't understand what you mean. How do we get to relate with that?
Not necessarily relating, but how do we get to react?
Let
me say that. Yeah.
We react exactly how is good at every given time. Some are fearful, some are mobilized to do something. Right? All I'm saying is that whole range is normal. Selo se se important ke gore motho o tshwantse gore a itse gore, is this flood coming or not? Am I safe or not? And even if I'm not safe, what's the next step? So psychological first aid, remember what I said, is we're ensuring there is no further harm. The further harm that is psychological is not having information. So we're feeding in of how vulnerable I am, because I get no information. So that's why I was going back to say it's very important to ensure that we're giving as much information as possible.
All right.
Updated.
Okay. Now, as we continue with our conversation, I've lost my notes here.
That's fine.
Yeah, you're talking about we have seen other people being given they're being given they're being evacuated, but mostly we neglect the most critical part, the psychological part. How can we come and bridge this gap as we disperse the help?
I'm so glad to hear you say this, because one of the things that has been happening, I've had so many young people say to me, how can we help? How can I help in my community? This is actually an opportune time, and I'm saying this now to the Ministry of Youth and all of those. Unemployment. Do you know what further makes us depressed is when we are not able to do stuff, right? So this is the time, this is a call to action, and I'm speaking to all the young people who are on their gadgets right now to say, whichever community you're in, moto le moto boto, you can show up at VDC, or community center, and then you can start on a cleanup, lele banana, and go into your communities and do that. Why is that important, you may ask? The thing about participating, I have this thing I say, play your part, be your art. It will heal your heart. So when you actually participate, how did I sing when momutsing or ufila corona le musola? That balm, how to sell mumwe, why tusa? So one of the things that I see that's a very missed opportunity right now is to activate the young people. Ke bone ba ileng gore they're agile, ba na le nako. Aba tsene mo go tlokweng kwana ba go khoteng and go and say to Khosi Gaborone, re ha re banana motso wa rona is underwater, what can we do? Right? And because the idea is that the government officials know where the data points are of where the needs are, they can mobilize young people. And that on itself, trust me, and I speak as a 25-year-old once upon a time who was at 9/11. I was I signed up to the Red Cross and I say, I'd like to help. And that on itself, how do people, what do people do in times of disasters? They do exactly what they're supposed to do, which is be fearful. It's a natural thing. You sit with it, and then you get the information.
All right, now we are wrapping up our conversation. We are left with just 2 minutes to wrap up the conversation. What are the long-term psychological challenges that disaster survivors might face, and how can we ensure that we support them despite the fact that we are past that?
Yes. Getting engaged right now, participating right now is, like I was saying, is a good thing for one, right? But PTSD very loosely, trauma. Nobody right now has PTSD from what just happened. right? Because it takes about 6 months to know gore ha ile gore trauma you are still re-experiencing o santse o ntse o re ha o ntse o robetse o akanya dipula tse nne di tsile, you are having nightmares, you're hypersensitive and that kind of stuff. Ha go nna lobaka o ntse o bontsha tsone dikarolo tsone tseo ke gone ha re ka re motho na le trauma. Right now we are all going through an acute stress, re na le stress se se go godimo, and it's overwhelming our coping mechanisms.
Right now, as we wrap up, what advice would you offer Botswana, those who are helping food survivors, to support them in a way that is trauma-informed and sensitive to their emotional needs?
To speak more towards the first responders, because I feel they're the ones who are taking care of the nation, and those are the very people that we forget. Right? So we need to support our first responders, because as we support our caring caregivers, we're supporting ourselves. In terms of funding coming in and stuff, I think we're gathering enough, but it's the people who are taking care of others that we're forgetting.
All right. And now we should take care of those who are taking care of others.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. And that is how we come to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much, Doctor, for such insights. I hope the few tips that we've given, they will really help. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, and that is how we come to the end of this conversation. I hand it through with me, disaster psychologist, Dr. Didimalang Sekoko, Biorn, to discuss the importance of psychological first aid as we experience the floods in this country. I'm coming right back with the 4 o'clock news.
The ministry, through the Department of Wildlife and National Parks, partnered with the University of Botswana, specifically the Okavango Research Institute, to consult Batswana and develop the National Human-Wildlife Conflict Strategy. The strategy